The open road. For some, it's a symbol of freedom, a ribbon of asphalt stretching towards new horizons. For others, it's a lifeline, a means to an end, a job that keeps the world moving. But for the men and women who spend their lives behind the wheel of an 18-wheeler, the road is also a place of isolation, long nights, and sometimes profound terror. Far from the comforting glow of city lights, out in the desolate stretches of highway, where cell service dies and the nearest town is 100 miles away, strange things happen. Things that defy explanation. Things that crawl into your mind and refuse to leave. These aren't just tall tales spun in truck stops. These are accounts from the road. From the grizzled veterans and the wide-eyed rookies, stories of encounters that prove some horrors don't need a dark forest or an abandoned house. Sometimes, all they need is a stretch of empty highway and the dead of night. Story 1. The Phantom Hitchhiker. This first story comes from a veteran trucker named Ray, who'd been hauling freight across the country for over 30 years. He was a no-nonsense kind of guy, seen it all, heard it all, and wasn't easily spooked. This happened to him back in the late 90s, on a long haul through rural Nevada, a stretch of highway known for its vast emptiness and sparse population. It was well past midnight, the kind of dark where the stars seem impossibly bright, and the only sound is the hum of your engine. Ray was making good time, pushing through the night to make a delivery deadline. He'd been driving for about 10 hours straight, fueled by coffee and the occasional energy drink. He was on a particularly desolate 2-lane road, not another car in sight for miles, when he saw her. A woman, standing on the side of the road, thumb out, illuminated briefly by his headlights. She was wearing a light-colored dress, which seemed odd for the middle of nowhere in the dead of night. Ray, being a cautious man, usually didn't pick up hitchhikers, especially not in such remote areas. But something about her, a vulnerability in her posture, made him slow down. He pulled over a few hundred feet past her, the air brakes hissing. He watched in his side mirror as she started walking towards the truck. As she got closer, he noticed she was barefoot, and her dress, he realized, wasn't light-colored. It was white, almost glowing in the faint moonlight. She reached the passenger door, and he leaned over to unlock it. As she climbed in, he got a better look at her. She was young, maybe early 20s, with long, dark hair. Her face was pale, almost translucent, and her eyes were wide and unblinking, fixed on something beyond him. "Thanks," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the idling engine. "I just need to get to the next town." Ray nodded, a strange feeling settling in his gut. He asked her where she was coming from, but she just shook her head, still staring straight ahead. He tried to make small talk, asking about her name, why she was out there, but she offered no answers, just that same blank stare. The silence in the cab became heavy, oppressive. Ray started to feel a chill, despite the heater blasting. He kept glancing at her out of the corner of his eye. She hadn't moved, hadn't shifted in her seat. Her hands were clasped tightly in her lap, and her bare feet were tucked beneath her. He noticed a faint, sweet smell, like old flowers, that seemed to emanate from her. It was unsettling. He pushed the speed up, wanting to get to the next town, to drop her off, to be rid of this strange passenger. After about 20 minutes, he saw the faint glow of lights on the horizon, the next town. He felt a wave of relief wash over him. "Looks like we're almost there," he said, trying to sound casual. He glanced over at her, expecting a reaction, but she was gone. The passenger empty. The door was closed, locked. There was no way she could have gotten out without her noticing. Ray slammed on the brakes, the truck skidding slightly on the asphalt. He jumped out, ran around to the passenger side and flung the door open. Nothing. Just the empty seat and the lingering scent of old flowers. Ray stood there for a long moment, the desert wind whipping around him, his heart pounding. He checked the back of the truck, the sleeper cab, even under the trailer. No one. He got back in the truck, his hands shaking, and drove the rest of the way to the town in a cold sweat. He never picked up another hitchhiker. To this day, he can't explain what happened that night. He knows what he saw, he knows what he felt, and sometimes, when he's driving alone on a desolate stretch of highway, late at night, he still catches a faint whiff of old flowers, and he knows she's out there, waiting for another ride. Story 2. The Whispering CB. Our second account comes from a young trucker named Mike, who was just starting his career on the road a few years ago, around 2020. He was enthusiastic, eager to see the country, and loved the camaraderie of the trucking community, especially the chatter on the CB radio. He'd spend hours listening to other drivers, sharing jokes, traffic updates, and the occasional warning about speed traps. But one night, the CB became less of a comfort and more of a source of chilling dread. It was on a cross-country run somewhere in the vast, empty plains of Nebraska. It was late, the kind of night where the highway stretches endlessly before you, illuminated only by your headlights. He was feeling a bit lonely, so he flipped on his CB, hoping to catch some conversation. The airwaves were mostly quiet, just the occasional burst of static. He was about to turn it off when he heard it. A faint whisper. It was barely audible, just at the edge of hearing, like someone speaking directly into the microphone from a great distance. He turned up the volume, straining to hear. It wasn't words, not exactly. More like a jumble of sounds, distorted and garbled, but with an undeniable human quality to them. He tried to respond. "Anyone out there? This is Mike, Channel 19. Nothing but static. He dismissed it as interference, a weak signal, or maybe just his imagination playing tricks on him after hours of driving. But then, it happened again. Clearer this time, a distinct, drawn-out sigh, followed by what sounded like a child's giggle. Mike's blood ran cold. He slammed on the brakes, pulling his rig onto the shoulder. He looked around. Nothing, just the endless fields and the dark sky. He grabbed his flashlight and scanned the cab, even checked the sleeper berth. Empty. He tried the CB again. "Hello, is anyone there? This isn't funny." The only response was sound. It was something primal, something ancient. Mike ripped the microphone out of its holder, his hands shaking, and threw it onto the passenger seat. He wanted to turn the CB off, but he couldn't bring himself to touch it. He just sat there, heart pounding, listening to the silence, punctuated by the occasional terrifying whisper or growl from the dead radio. He spent the rest of the night driving in silence, the CB glowing ominously on his dashboard. Every time he passed a dark, deserted stretch of road, he'd hear a faint whisper, or a child's giggle, or that low growl, even with the microphone disconnected. It was as if the sounds were coming from inside his head, or from the very air around him. He tried to rationalize it, telling himself it was just fatigue or the isolation. But the fear was real, a cold knot in his stomach. He finally pulled into a truck stop at dawn, exhausted and shaken. He parked his rig, got out, and without a second thought he ripped the CB radio from its mount, wires and all, and threw it into a dumpster. He bought a new one later that day, a different Vaughn's, a different model. He never heard those whispers or growls again. But to this day, when he's driving alone on a quiet highway late at night, he sometimes catches himself listening, straining to hear something, anything on the silent airwaves. And he knows, deep down, that some voices are not meant to be heard, and some secrets are best left unspoken. Story 3. The Empty Rest Stop. This final account comes from a series of online forums dedicated to unexplained phenomena, specifically from a user who recounted their experience from a long-haul trip through rural Arizona in early 2021. The trucker, who went by the handle Desert Dog, was known for his calm demeanor and his meticulous record-keeping of his routes and stops. This particular incident, however, left him questioning everything he thought he knew about the road. Desert Dog was on a tight schedule, pushing through the night to make a delivery in California. He'd been driving for about 12 hours and was starting to feel the fatigue set in. He spotted a sign for a rest stop about 5 miles ahead and decided to pull over for a quick nap and a stretch. It was a standard rest stop, a small building with restrooms, a few picnic tables, and a large parking lot for trucks and cars. When he pulled in, it was completely empty. Not a single car, not a single truck, which was unusual for that time of night, even in a remote area. He parked his rig away from the building and killed the engine. The silence was immediate and profound, broken only by the distant hum of the highway. He decided to use the restroom before settling in for his nap. He grabbed his keys and flashlight and the smell of stale air and disinfectant hit him. The restrooms were empty, just as the parking lot had been. He used the facilities quickly, the flickering lights and the oppressive silence making him uneasy. As he washed his hands, he heard it. The faint, almost imperceptible scratching sound coming from one of the stalls. He froze, listening. The scratching continued, slow and deliberate, like fingernails dragging across a hard surface. He called out, "Hello? Anyone in there?" The scratching stopped. He waited, but there was no response. He told himself it was just the building settling, or maybe an animal. He quickly exited the restroom, eager to get back to his truck. As he walked across the parking lot, he glanced back at the building. The lights were still flickering. And then he saw it. A figure standing in the doorway of the rest stop building, silhouetted against the flickering light. It was tall and thin, almost unnaturally so, and it seemed to be staring directly at him. He couldn't make out any features, just the dark outline against the intermittent light. He quickened his pace, fumbling for his truck keys. He reached his rig, jumped inside, and locked the doors. He started the engine, his heart pounding. He glanced in his rearview mirror. The figure was still there, still standing in the doorway, still watching him. He put the truck in gear and slowly pulled out of the parking spot, his eyes fixed on the figure. As he drove past the building, he saw it clearly for a split second. It wasn't a person. It was a mannequin. A life-sized, crudely painted mannequin, dressed in what looked like an old, faded park ranger uniform. Its eyes were painted black, staring blankly ahead, and its right hand was raised, its fingers splayed, as if waving goodbye. Desert Dog floored it, speeding out of the rest stop, not looking back. He drove for another 2 hours before he finally pulled over at a busy truck stop, surrounded by other rigs and the comforting sounds of human activity. He never stopped at that rest stop again. He tried to find information about it online, but there was no mention of any mannequins or strange occurrences. He even checked the satellite images, but the rest stop looked perfectly normal, just an empty building in the middle of nowhere. He still can't explain the scratching sound, or why the rest stop was completely empty, or why that mannequin was there, watching him. He just knows that some places on the road are best avoided, and some things are better left unexplained.